In italiano o in inglese?
In inglese.
Inglese?
Perfetto. Perfetto.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this annual conference on international cooperation for development. This event is promoted every year by CeTAmb, a research and documentation center on appropriate technologies for environment management in resource-limited countries. This center was born in 2000, and in these 20 years of activity, it has supported and promoted different research and training activities that involved several students and researchers. This meeting has been organized in December for 17 years and is an important moment of discussion on the issues of cooperation with experts, researchers, non-government organizations, partners from developing countries, and different university and high school students. This year's conference addresses the issues of international cooperation in conditions of health emergency, in this particular moment of pandemic linked to COVID-19. Professor Ali Mansour, that is the coordinator of the morning session, had an unexpected event, and therefore I will replace him until mid-morning. Before opening the conference, now let me welcome the rector of our university, Professor Maurizio Tira, who will deliver his opening greetings and remarks. Please, Professor Tira.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Sabrina, for introducing me. I'm really very happy, as every year since 17 years, I think, to take part in this conference. It is very important what you're doing because, as you know, we are discussing because of pandemic, but not just because of pandemic, of new development patterns for the entire planet. And I think that the contribute that the low-income countries have to give to all humanity is crucial. Sustainability comes from the idea that the development must be sustainable for all countries in the same time and for the next generations. In this exact moment, this morning, there is another reflection meeting in Brescia about the next generation EU. So we are reflecting how to use the European money for what we call in Italy recovery fund, 800 billion euros, so a huge amount of money to restart a new sustainable development. But in this mood, I think that low-income countries have to give back a crucial importance. CeTAmb, founded 20 years ago, has always given a most important to the low-income countries and to the transfer of appropriate technologies to these countries. And I think this is still a very important subject for making research, teaching, and also what we call the third mission, so a service for the territory and for the other countries, as we will see at the end of the conference today with the NGO roundtable. So I thank you, Professor Sorlini and Professor Varcari, for organizing the conference this year. I thank you, Professor Colli Vignarelli, for having the intuition 20 years ago to found a center that was one of the first examples of interdisciplinary research in our university, I think, and one of the first examples of third mission of our university, because the relation with the NGOs, starting from the very starting point, is very an example for many other activities that came later. And I thank you also, Professor Bertanza, that for the first year he is the director of department introducing the conference, whilst usually he was one of the organizers of the conference. So the topic that you're dealing with this year is very important, and I think it will be also at the heart of the next generation EU. But again, you have to raise and keep alive the interest of the low-income countries, how these people that maybe have less access to resources, less voice in the international organization, can arise the problem that they are feeling. When I was in the Paris conference 5 years ago, it was very inspiring to listen to the Minister of Environment coming from different countries in the world. So the perspective we have in Europe is totally different from the perspective they have in India, for example, or in Africa, for example, of what is sustainable development. So what is sustainable development when you have to deal with no clean water, sanitation problem, hygiene, basic problems that we have resolved from decades in Europe, for example. So we have to go forward together, all the planet. Otherwise, there will not be a future for the planet. And this is not in the core of the politics, I think, worldwide. So thank you for keeping alive the interest in the low-income countries and the role that we have to play as rich Europeans to transfer appropriate technologies to these countries and to try to foster a really sustainable development that is sustainable nowadays for all corners in the world. Thank you very much. Have a nice day of work. I'm sorry, as always, as a rector, I cannot follow the conferences that are opening. So after years, I will have opened a lot of conferences and listened to nobody. So I'm really very sorry, but feel at home in Brescia, even virtually, and hoping to see you soon, very soon in presence. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you.
I thank the rector for his speech, and now I give the floor to Professor Giorgio Bertanza, who is the director of CeTAmb, the Department of Civil Engineering, Environment, Land, Architecture and Mathematics, where CeTAmb has been operating since its origin. Please, Giorgio Bertanza.
Thank you very much to our rector, to Sabrina Sorlini and Professor Vaccari and Professor Corvignanelli, as already our rector said. Good morning, everybody. As the head of the department, which virtually hosts this conference, I'm honored to welcome all of you in Brescia, even if virtually. Well, I think that finally, after some weeks of travels, we got used to these new tools and platforms for communicating, and now we can appreciate the advantage they give to share knowledge with a greater audience and many countries, except of course the difficulties for different time zones in some cases. The attendance of more than 200 delegates for the morning session may demonstrate this, how these new tools may help us to better communicate and share knowledge and experience. As already said, the CeTAmb Center was founded 20 years ago in our department, and this international conference is being held every year since 2004, and this being the 17th edition, and this demonstrates how the activity of CeTAmb is very hard and continuous every year. Many research projects involve our students of our department. Our department is mainly focused on topics of sanitation, water supply, water management, land management, waste and recycling, and more recently also agricultural science. But the activities promoted by CeTAmb have several connections with many other areas, from medicine, economics, anthropology, sociology, and many others. And these projects are a good opportunity for many bachelor and master students of our department, as well as PhD students, to be involved in issues of international cooperation. And actually several students make this choice during their course. In our department, we have courses, both bachelor and master, mainly specifically in civil and environmental engineering, which account for about 1,200 students. And I want to underline that we have an international master degree, where half of the students come from other countries. And as I said, more recently we have opened a new course in agricultural science, which might be very much involved in the activity of CeTAmb. And we have a PhD school with about 35 students. And in this PhD school, we have a profile specifically devoted to methodologies and appropriate technologies for international cooperation. So once again, welcome to Brescia, virtually, of course. I wish all of you a very fruitful conference that I'm sure it will be outstanding given the high expertise of the speakers involved. Have a nice day to all of you.
Thank you, Giorgio Bertanza, for your speech. And now let me introduce the morning session with the first presentation. Mentore Baccari will deliver an introduction to the conference. Mentore is a professor of sanitary and environmental engineering, and he actively participates in all CeTAmb's activities. Please, Mentore.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, for this introduction. I sharing my screen. Can you see it or not? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So in this brief talk, I will introduce briefly the research activities of our research center and the aims, the topics of this conference. Our research center focuses activity on up-to-date technologies for environmental protection in research-limited countries. It was founded, it was born in 2000, 20 years ago, with the aim to research up-to-date technical solution to face environmental issues in developing countries. Sabrina Sorlino is the scientific director of this research center. At the moment, we are 4 professors and we have 8 PhD students working with us. The detailed aims of our research center are promoting contacts with developing countries, favoring the dissemination of information about international cooperation projects, boosting, coordinating and performing research projects with and in developing countries, supporting cultural exchanges, organizing specific conferences as today to increase the attention for environmental management and protection in low and middle-income countries, and organizing courses and summer schools. So far, we have organized the 17th international congresses. We have organized a lot of refresh courses and 9 international summer schools, more than 100 specific seminars on international cooperation and up-to-date technologies. We had a PhD school from 2008 and 2016 on up-to-date methods and technologies for international development cooperation. Now we have a school in civil and environmental engineering, international cooperation and mathematics. We have had a long list of cultural exchanges. Every year we have an award for students, for graduated students who had their thesis on up-to-date technologies for environmental protection in low and middle-income countries. So far, we have carried out more than 80 research and cooperation projects in those countries, 31 cycles of seminars held by more than 20 distinct professors, 45 collaboration agreements, around 50 papers in scientific journals, and 50 publications in proceedings of international conferences, and also 16 books. As I said, at the moment we have 8 PhD students working with us. In the past, 20 PhD students finished their PhD in the technological track, and 16 students ended their PhD in the health track. We supervised 115 master and bachelor students, and 91 students had their thesis with a mission in a low and middle income country. And our PhD students had their activities mainly in Africa, as you can see here, and but also in Asia, in America, in South America, and also in Eastern Europe. The bachelor and master students that we supervised got their degree mainly in the environmental engineering, in mechanical industrial engineering and civil engineering. Half of them had a mission abroad, mainly again in Africa and in Southern America. There's a long list of cultural exchanges that we had with the people living and working, researching in these countries. Our researches deal with drinking water treatment, wastewater treatment, sanitation, solid waste management, and energy from waste. We are environmental engineers, so these are the research topics of our research center. This slide shows the project that we had and the countries we worked in. They are around 30 countries, mainly, as you can see, in Africa and in Southern America. But we had also experiences in Middle East, in Asia, and Eastern Europe, like I said before. Yes, 30% of our researches were about energy production, 30% about water treatment, and around 40% about solid waste management. Not only municipal solid waste, but also healthcare waste management and electronic waste. Our project researches are both on two main topics. Some projects regard the development and testing of new technologies, and other projects has a different aim. The aim is to improve, optimize the management, the operation of technologies that are already present in those settings. At the moment, we have, for instance, drinking water treatment, a project about washing schools in Brazil. We have just finished another project on sanitation concepts in peri-urban areas in Tanzania. We have a project now in northern Ghana about agriculture and organic waste recovery. And we have just finished a project in Jordan about energy production from waste, from organic waste by anaerobic digestion. A long list of agreements that we have with different actors in those settings. Our activities involve different actors as NGOs and volunteers, local institutions, enterprises and professional associations, civil society, schools, university, research centers, both in Italy and in developing countries. We have had different activities, for instance, with the high schools that are present in our province of Brescia, and also in the province of Mantua, and it was a very nice experience. And as I said at the beginning, our focus is the research of appropriate technologies for environmental protection in middle-income countries. Actually, the concept of appropriate technologies can be referred to Gandhi, who used to suggest the use of small local and village-based technologies to help India's villages to become self-reliant from the Britain Empire. But actually the concept of appropriate technology was theorized by Professor Schumacher. He was an economist, a German economist working in the UK. In the 60s of the last century, he introduced this concept of intermediate technology that then was developed in the new concept of appropriate technologies. And he promoted the use of technologies that are small scale, labor intensive, energy efficient, environmentally sound, and locally controlled to improve the community standard of living. The concept of appropriate technologies has changed in the time. In this slide, I tried to summarize in a very simplified way the properties of that an appropriate technology should have. So it should pay attention to real problems and local needs, and it should have a strong link with local reality. It must be simple to produce with local materials, simple to use, to maintain. It must be built with the rational use of natural resources, and it must have a low environmental impact, and it must be as cheap as possible, both in terms of investment and operational costs. Let's come to the topic of this annual conference. Every year we change the topic of annual conference. For instance, in our conference was the sustainability of international development cooperation project. This year, as we know, we had this tragic COVID-19 pandemic in our countries, which, has hit our lives, our families, which has changed the way we live, our behavior, our perspectives, our perceptions. So, and we know that in developing countries, in low and middle-income countries, health emergencies is almost the rule, and this fact impacts heavily the way people live in those settings. So when we met a few months ago to discuss identify the topic of this conference, it was quite natural for us to think about the impact that pandemic have on people and also on the international development cooperation projects. So we decided to focus this annual conference, CeTAmb annual conference, on this topic, but this conference is not on COVID-19 pandemic. In our intention, it must have a wider perspective, and we want to, in this conference, to meditate, or to discuss, to debate on more generally on the impact that the health emergency have on our lives and on people living in low and middle-income countries. In particular, we wanted to discuss on these two main questions that are shown in this slide. So, which are the effects of health emergencies on the actors and activities of the international development cooperation, and how can WASH technologies? Why WASH technology? Because, as I said before, CeTAmb focuses its activity on these technologies. So, how can WASH technologies and how much can WASH technologies and international development cooperation projects help tackle health emergencies? This morning we are having a different talk on these aspects. We have talks about infectious disease, about water and sanitation, solid waste management and health and emergency. We are having also a few talks about case studies. And at the end of the morning, we are having a discussion with the speaker to debate on these topics. I remind you that in the afternoon, we have another session. It's in Italian, and this session is focused on environmental chaining and appropriate technologies. During this session, a lot of case studies will be presented, case studies and experiences will be presented by high school and university students. And at the end of the afternoon session, we are having a panel with NGOs to discuss the role of cooperation, development cooperation in health emergency. This is the end of my presentation. I thank you for your attention. If you want to have any info about our research center, you can look for this info in our website, or you can write us by email. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Mentore. Now we can start with the first presentation of this session. And this presentation deals with the challenge of infectious disease, the past and the future. And the speaker is Professor Alberto Matteelli. He is Associate Professor of Infectious Disease at the University of Brescia. Please, Alberto Matteelli.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. Thank you very much, Mentore, for inviting me. Can you hear me? Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Perfect. So my topic will be the challenge of infectious diseases in the past and in the future, and of course there is the spectrum of COVID-19 behind everything. But in fact, I will not talk about this disease today. It has been said that the only competitors of man for the dominion of this planet are viruses or other microorganisms, and what will be the outcome of the fight is still undecided. In the past, there were really big wars between these human beings and microorganisms, and you have a list here just to mention the one that were causing the worst damages for the humankind. You can see the Black Plague that in the 6-year period in the mid of the 14th century killed about 1/3 of the population in Europe, in Asia, and in the Middle East. And in fact, it was really a catastrophe of huge dimension that, however, opened the ways for the renaissance of Europe and Italy in particular. And just to mention another one, the Spanish flu in 1918 for a couple of years until 1920, exactly during and immediately afterwards the First World War, was really a huge second plague for the human being, with 1/4 of the world's population being affected, and the number of deaths that ranged between 30 and 100 million. Of course, in those times it was a little bit difficult to get real and precise numbers. More recently, after the 50s, and particularly after World War II, World War II, there were a lot of gains and advances in the health system, spanning from vaccines, antibiotics, better nutrition, better housing, and better sanitation. There were immediate effect or very quick effect of these progresses on many diseases: smallpox, for example, diphtheria, whooping cough, tetanus, measles, and so on. There were other big happenings in the last century, like the institution of the WHO in 1948. There was Czechoslovakia becoming the first country to to eradicate poliomyelitis in 1960 until the eradication of smallpox in 1980 was probably the biggest achievement ever in the history of infectious diseases. What was the story between the microbial life and the human life, which was very slowly evolving through the centuries, became suddenly modified by human civilization that in the last century had a global impact on the environment through physical, chemical, societal, and climatic determinants. These look to be a new sunrise and with new horizons for the humankind, so that the Minister of Health of the USA in 1969 dared to say that it's time to close the book of infectious diseases and the war against pestilence is over. That was a very optimistic view. It's true that if you look at this pie, the share of communicable diseases in red is now, in the year 2012, reduced to 17% of cause of all deaths worldwide. And this was by far in the Middle Ages the very first cause of death. But now it is overcome by cardiovascular diseases, by cancer, and so on. What happened in the 21st century is then, or at the end of including the end of last century, there were new epidemics, which are well known to us because we are living in the middle of them, starting from the AIDS epidemic in 1976. The first coronavirus epidemic due to SARS coronavirus 1 in 2002-2003, and many others, as you see there, with the last of the list, but not the least, of course, is SARS coronavirus 2. And just to get some example, you can see here the spread of SARS coronavirus 1 in 2003. It started from China, and then it spread not only in Asia, but also in Europe, and particularly in the United States, where in Canada, quite a number of secondary cases and deaths occurred in 2003. And more recently, Ebola, which has been considered a very deadly disease, but always confined to Africa, then became a catastrophe for Africa itself in 2013, but it also started leaking outside Africa with secondary cases in Europe and in the United States. And this is only the herald of something that may become worse in the next future. Now, there are quite a number of reasons to think that infectious diseases, in fact, are not over, as the Minister of Health of the United States was saying almost 50 years ago. And the first is the growth of urban population. You can see in the picture here that from 5.3 billion people in 1990, we are already now in over 7 billion people, with an estimate to reach 11 billion people in 2010. And these trends, if we continue on with this trend, will be really will hugely affect the generations to come. The growth in the urban population will not be the same all over the world, and particularly areas that are not yet overcrowded today, like, for example, the African continent, will in fact see a huge increase in the population, doubling their numbers by 2050. And another important factor here is that the population, which was mainly located in rural areas until 2010, 2015. So you see very recent figures. Now inverted the trend, and now there are more people living in urban areas compared to rural areas, and this gap is destined to increase remarkably in the next future. The first effect of this will be that the human being will become closer and closer to areas where infectious agents live. And what you can see here is that the ecosystems, of course, will be dramatically touched by the urbanization process. The second factor will be climate change, and this is one of the major problems for the human being today. And climate change have a lot of effect, but one of the most important one will be on the transmission cycle of pathogens, and particularly WHO already demonstrated more than 20 years ago that at that time climate changes had already been responsible for an increase of 2.4% in the worldwide cases of diarrhea and up to 6% in the world cases of malaria. Malaria will definitely be one of the most affected diseases transmitted by the Anopheles mosquitoes, and you can see here what is the projected situation of malaria in 2080, with still the bulk of the number of cases being present in the tropical belt, but with area of transmission covering most of the United States and almost the whole of Europe and Asia. And this will be due to the expanded action of the vector of Anopheles mosquitoes and other vectors, like, for example, Aedes aegypti or Aedes albopictus, will be similarly responsible for the spread of other vector-borne diseases like dengue, Zika, or yellow fever. And then there is the factor of travel and migration. This is the trend of international tourist arrivals. By 2010, it was 1 billion, and it will almost double in the following 20 years up to 2030. So 1.8 traveling people for tourism, which can also spread infectious diseases. And the effect will be even bigger if you look at the international migration that also is going to increase. And it will be a vicious circle, because one of the most important determinants of migration is exactly climate changes, with vast part of the globe which are not prone anymore to agriculture. And finally, another very important problem, which is antimicrobial resistance. This has been recognized one of the major current health problems, to the extent that one United Nations General Assembly was dedicated on antimicrobial resistance. And this very rarely happens, that the health issue is brought to the attention of the General Assembly. And there are good reasons for that. You can see here that the forecast by 2050 will be that there will be 10 million deaths due to antimicrobial resistance, and antimicrobial resistance will become the major killer, overcoming cancer and overcoming other diseases. And this will not, antimicrobial resistance will not only ask a toll for human life, but it will also a huge problem in terms of economic losses. And you can see here how big will become the expenses caused by the worsening of antimicrobial resistance. I want to close making a reference to a publication from the World Health Organization of last year, a group of experts, after deep working, listed the 10 threats, the major threats to global health in 2019. And it's remarkable that even today, even at our in our age, most or many of these threats are infectious diseases. There will be pollution and climate changes, there will be non-communicable diseases, but then there will be the global influenza pandemic. The last one was in 2009, and we experienced it as not such a dramatic event, but I can tell you that the next influenza pandemics can have very different effects. And then there are other non-infectious conditions like fragile and vulnerable settings, weak primary health care, vaccines hesitancy. And then again, we come to the antimicrobial resistance we have just discussed that is going to worsen. Dengue, which is poorly known probably at our latitude, is in fact one of the major diseases affecting and killing people, particularly small kids in other areas. Number 9, of course, there will be the HIV pandemic, which is not going to leave us very soon. And number 10, that's particularly interesting, Ebola and other high-threat pathogens. What are these high-threat pathogens? There are some which are listed under this chapter, but most importantly, there will be an X disease that is forecasted to appear in the future. And this forecast, in fact, has been extremely timely and extremely realistic. In December 2019, starting from bats in China, a new virus came over. You can see it in the picture, and it was actually the sunrise of a new huge and very deadly epidemic, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are looking for final solution, and it might be the case in the future that the Earth will not be a good environment for us. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready to answer to any questions.
Thank you, Alberto, for this very interesting speech and presentation. And I think that we will have time for questions at the end of all the presentation, if you keep connected.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Now we can move to the next presentation. The title is Water and Sanitation in the COVID-19 Era. And the speaker is Luca Lucentini. Luca is the director of the section of Inlet Water and Hygiene in the Department of Environment and Primary Prevention at the National Institute for Health. Luca, please, you can start now.
He's not in, Sabrina. I can't
No?
see. No. Maybe he has some problem.
Okay, okay. Sorry, I didn't.
Okay, hello, Luca.
Hello to everybody. I'm very sorry. I couldn't charge my presentation, so I need really of 3 minutes because there is an updating of the system. So I'm not able to. I may propose if you have some question or if you can employ a couple of minutes, I try to manage to charge the presentation.
Yes, okay. Or otherwise, you can try to send us and we can share your presentation.
Okay, no, my problem is to open it.
Okay, but in the meanwhile, if Alberto Matteelli is still connected, Alberto, are you connected? No? Because if he is connected, we can we could ask for question if anybody have question. Otherwise, we can move to the next presentation if Christian Zurbrugge is connected.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, Christian.
Hello.
So, if you agree, we can go to the next presentation, and then we will be back to you, Luca Lucentini, okay? Okay. So, the next one is a presentation on solid waste management and health in emergency and humanitarian settings. I thank you, Christian, for participating in this conference. Christian Zurbrugge is a senior researcher at Sandek EAVAG in Zurich. Okay, so Christian, we can start. Thank you.
So thanks. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, everybody, and thanks very much for the invitation to speak. The topic that I would like to discuss today is the aspect of solid waste management, especially related to emergency and humanitarian settings, and maybe highlight the health implications specifically. Also related, of course, to the recent pandemic issues. So maybe to start off by just saying, you know, what we just heard from the previous presentation, Mattelli, around the issues of what are the kind of conditionalities that create these health threats. And I think what was mentioned is urbanization, increasing of density, and of course then with that hand in hand are the issues of hygienic conditions in these urban settings, in this settlement where people live very close to each other and as such also then are exposed to aspects of disease. And I think when we think of waste management is really a basic service to keep our settlements and our environment around our people, where people live, clean. And typically we show this in this double triangle. So it has elements of physical engineering perspectives, of collection, of recycling, of disposal or treatment. And here, of course, if these services cannot be guaranteed, there is a very clear impact on public health. And I'll just show a few examples of that. And of course, all these services are embedded in a governance framework. So making sure that you have institutions, you have policies that can actually manage and operate such services and make sure that also all users, independent of income, have a provision of service and we can ensure from a public health objective that all these users or the waste generators are provided a healthy environment to live in. So this is really basic service. And this basic service does not really change very much depending on the emergency, on the disaster, on whatever event, if there is a pandemic or if there's a disease that starts multiplicating in the environment. This basic service is always something that we really need to ensure, because as soon as this basic services fails, then of course this whole maintenance of hygiene in the settlement area, in the place where people are potentially exposed, of course, deteriorates, and of course that then even makes the situation much more acute. One aspect, which is not even so long ago, is actually an outbreak of plague in India, a very famous case. where that led to death. And if you know the disease plague, it is transmitted through vectors, be that rats, then over the fleas that live on the rats to people. And of course, the proliferation of rats has a direct connection to waste in neighborhoods, in the living quarters. So unhygienic conditions, especially of waste that the rats can then feed on, and in that sense replicate themselves, has an enormous impact. And in this case of Surat, it was directly connected to uncollected waste, blocked drains in neighborhoods, which had a result in 56 people dying. But even more, I would say, impactful were not the deaths, but the economic impact. So similar to what is happening, what we kind of observe also now in the COVID-19 situation, there was a total lockdown in a way of the economy. People migrated away from the city. They fled the city. So all economics activities stopped. There were over $2 billion of losses in economy. And that was also even for the whole country. So, for instance, the Middle East stopped importing food from India because they were worried that with importing food, they would also import the disease, and had a very strong impact. What is also interesting to mention here is that in 2013, Surat actually was awarded the Cleanest City Award by the Indian government. So also showing that such a crisis can actually trigger a lot of change. So such crises can result in extreme political motivation, and much more funds, much more resources, much more political willingness, also public participation to actually change the situation. And I think we should also keep that in mind in terms of the recent pandemics. So they are using such crises to actually change our system, to make it more sustainable, to make it more functional, is also a chance to move forward. Besides the plague, actually, I wanted also to mention that many solid waste associated diseases are very much connected to the vectors. But for instance, dengue was mentioned, is directly connected to mosquitoes, and mosquitoes, of course, breed in stagnant water. And when you have solid waste, you have more opportunities for mosquitoes to breed, and the same also with the Zika virus that is also transmitted by mosquitoes. And of course, the plague example transmitted by rats and fleas. So when we think of an emergency situation, what actually changes in our current system? And I think these are some examples. So typically, waste generation might be different. So the normal generation of waste, as we are used to it, might be much higher suddenly in an emergency situation. And we'll talk about that later in the case also of COVID, but other disasters. The hazardousness of waste might be different. So suddenly we might have to start dealing with waste which is much more dangerous than it usually was. And of course, you see some relation here, of course, in our COVID pandemic, suddenly materials that are contaminated that we need to treat differently that before we did not have to manage. Also, habitat and the services might be different. It might change the housing situation, it might change the hygiene situation. And then there are more the operational aspects that might be impacted. So mobility and accessibility might be different. We might have blocked roads. It might be more difficult to provide services, but then also staffing and equipment may be limited. And I think that is specifically in our last half year or in times of lockdown, we had this issues where, of course, solid waste staff that were also being affected by the disease and not being able to work, and suddenly then staffing is limited, not being able to provide the services that are required at a day-to-day basis. What is typically needed? And here my key message would be coordination, coordination, and coordination. And I think that is the kind of key challenge to all emergency situations, is a very good coordination among all actors, and ideally with disaster preparedness plans, so that we think in advance of what things could come up and how we would react, rather than reacting after the situation has happened, already having ideas of what plans we have to react before the emergency and the disaster happens. And of course, then once the emergency is there, or once the disaster happens, a lot about information, coordination, understanding the situation, evaluating the situation, showing which priorities have to be, which issues have to be prioritized, is a very big issue. So I'll just show you some pictures. This was the earthquake in Haiti, where you see suddenly the new situation, the challenges that the waste management system has to face. And of course, even being able to access these areas. So here you see already cleared roads, but of course, in the immediate response after the disaster, this looked very much different. Or here, the tsunami in Southeast Asia, where suddenly you are faced with totally different materials that you need to be able to manage and operate with. And especially, of course, such situations which create a very acute and critical situation in terms of hygiene, especially when you consider that you might have dead animals, even dead bodies in this situation, and of course, a breakdown of all the services that are also connected to hygiene, be that sanitation, be that water supply, and of course, then the solid waste situation. So one aspect is, of course, the waste composition is not similar to what we usually have in municipal solid waste. Again, a picture from the tsunami, where you have all these different elements that you typically don't have, not in such great amounts. But of course, not to forget also an increase in medical waste. Medical waste might increase not necessarily right after the disaster or the emergencies, but in the later stages when medical services start kicking in and start being an important aspect of daily life to kind of remediate the situation. Then, of course, we also have to think about the medical waste that these medical services generate and how to manage those. In humanitarian aid, we have what we call the SPHERE standard. And I just copied out here what is written to regard to solid waste management. And if you read this, you actually see that it is very much basic services. So the basic services of solid waste management, which are also valid for normal situations and normal daily situations, those are the services that really need to be guaranteed also during humanitarian aid and emergency situations. I have here a few examples of the impacts of different disaster or emergency events. And I think what I would like, without going through the details, I would like to show you that also what is very relevant is that in most cases, the impacts of disasters, of emergencies, also impacts on people moving, people living in other areas. So new relocation, new shelters, new camps. And you see that is valid for earthquakes, for floods, even for conflicts. And that means new settlements very haphazard settlements, maybe not good habitat quality, where, of course, then the hygiene situation becomes very critical, and solid waste services have to be maintained. And this is an example, of course, of such refugee camps, this one in Africa, but of course, this is also valid for, we don't have to go so far. We can also stay in our European context if we think of the refugee streams and migration streams in Greece. And of course, that provides a very high challenge for the solid waste services. Of course, some events like the COVID, they don't disrupt really the normal waste management system, except for, of course, the number of waste management workers and maybe the issues of hazardousness of the materials. But if we do have services that are well functioning, the impact of that should not be the challenges do not change in that sense. Of course, when we go into low and middle income countries, where the situation maybe of the current service is not yet very hygienic, then of course the people in contact with waste can be affected quite severely. Thinking of recyclers, which are in daily contact with materials. Of course, if these materials are contaminated, there is, of course, the risk of spread of disease through these materials. And one aspect of very great importance here is, of course, personal protective equipment, especially for the personnel that is working in waste. And having not only equipment, but also the possibility to have facilities to be able to clean, to change, to wash after and during working with waste. So this is a typical rapid response cycle. I wanted to show this because I think there's a difference in the short-term measures that we take and rather the long-term measures that we take. So in the short term, we usually have a very rapid response where we don't think in long term, where we need to alleviate the immediate impact for the people, for the survivors, or also for the environment. But then this moves very quickly into a rather longer term planning for rehabilitation or reconstruction. And I think here we do not need to forget that the planning is towards more sustainability, durability, and appropriateness. So we need to think of not what we can do when a lot of money is flowing and when everybody is very motivated to do something. That's usually typical after the event. But also, what are the plans for handing over after our immediate reaction? What is an exit strategy to make the services sustainable in the long run? And I think that is something which often the disaster response group unfortunately does not think of sufficiently, is what happens when the disaster is in a way kind of mitigated, or the direct effects of the disaster are mitigated, and then the next phase comes where the services need to be provided in the long run. There's always the question of what is the importance of recycling, and here just to show you this, that I think in the immediate reaction there is usually a thinking that is necessary of what could be recycled. And then maybe moving that to a later stage of processing and treatment, which is not necessarily the most urgent action in the first stage of disaster response. Finally, coming back to this, I think just to conclude, I think really solid waste management, solid waste services are very critical, because they affect kind of the hygienic environment. be that for whatever emergency is there, whatever health threat is there, maintaining these services regularly and reliably is really one of the critical issues for basic services and to maintain the health of the population. And with that, I would like to end and give you some more ideas for further reading. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian, for this very interesting presentation. And now we can go to the presentation on water and sanitation in the COVID-19 era. And the speaker is Luca Lucentini from the National Institute for Health. He is director of the section on inlet water hygiene in the Department of Environment and Primary Prevention. Please, Luca, if you are ready, you can start.
Yes, I try to share my video.
Yes.
Just a moment. Oh, in PowerPoint. Just a moment. Sorry. So, could you see something? Could you see?
Okay, now we can see it.
Okay, so
okay.
See, now could you see the presentation?
Not yet. Yes, now I can see the presentation.
Okay.
You can start.
So thank you for your patience. Okay, I'm in charge of quality of water and health within the National Institute of Health. You can see here our logo among many others logo. And the reason why I want to represent lots of institutions is the first message in my presentation. This kind of problem of crisis, which is the SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-related pandemic events, is just have to be approached by a multi-institutional and multidisciplinary approach. Because if you think to the health as spread in many environments and sections, we know very well that the only way to solve the problem and to prevent sanitary consequences of pandemic events, but also chemical pollution events or whatever, is to approach all the problems with one health approach, which means practically to identify and follow the pathogens into the different sections of the environment before they arrive to the human body. And which means to investigate the environmental elements, the animal elements, and the human bodies. This is very clear now after the zoonosis concept. We know that most part of infection diseases derived from zoonosis, which is the passage from pathogens in animals to pathogens in humans. But unfortunately, we don't have enough perception and management of water as one water, and that's a problem, because lots part of the problems in drinking water or in bathing water are deriving from a problem in wastewater. So in other terms, we cause the same problem we want to solve in other water. We cause some problems in one water, and then we want to solve a problem in another water. So we should approach the problem with this kind of approach that we are proposing. And to do this, to approach this challenging item, we should rethink the health problem in a so-called transformation approach, which means that health should contribute and should cooperate with the other sectors with sanitary advocacy to prevent any kind of problems. Going directly to the COVID problem, we know that the virus is spread by respiratory media, and we know very well also the dimensions of the droplets and so on. So it is very low the risk we can have the transmission of this kind of respiratory virus through water environments. We know anyway that there were in SARS-CoV-1 a problem related to transmission of the virus through droplets in toilets, but we have fortunately no real evidence of this kind of transmission for SARS-CoV-2 virus in all over the world. Anyway, it's true that 80% of the patients entering in contact with the virus can excrete the virus through feces and other human fluids. And it is very interesting that sometimes this excretion precedes the positive swab and also can be detected the presence of the virus in the feces, also after we are negative to the swab. So there is a debate now in the scientific side because some paper is reporting that the virus could multiply also in the gastrointestinal tract of the body, even if the virus is, you know very well, a respiratory virus. So we don't know exactly how much virus is excreted by the humans, but is sure that it is excreted and potentially also in the infective way. So as the National Institute of Health, we should reply to many questions, especially in the first wave, but also now, related to the management of wastewater treatment plants, but also the perception of risk in drinking water and problems of this kind of entity. And we tried to give general but also specific instructions. In this case, in this slide, you can see the correct management of sludges and the retention time and temperature, for which there is evidence that the virus is not yet infected. Another answer we gave was about the management of WASH, which means water and sanitation hygiene, into the water services. And you can see here, I'm sorry that the slide is in Italian, but what kind of risk can reach the human through exposure as an example to bathing water. We can have problem of theoretical problem of exposure to the infective virion in bathing water if we have the circumstances in which raw wastewater is discharged directly in aquifers. So we were pressed before summer to give guidelines for bathing water, and we gave a series of instructions which essentially consider very low, minimal the risk of virus in bathing water, and especially consider the existing monitoring related to indicator microbiological parameters as enough protective also in terms of risk from SARS-CoV-2. You can see here the problem of the risk, the nature of the risk, and why the existing mitigation, especially the sunlight, is enough to allow the activities on bathing water. So this is the conclusion. I'm sorry for this slide in Italian. I try to send you the file in English after the meeting. Okay, so what the basic and summary instruction were that water intended for human consumption are safe and are essential in prevention of COVID spread in one country. I want to stress this concept. As country, but also as system, we are proud that water systems were not seriously affected by COVID. Because without water services, this kind of crisis could be much more massive, much more impacting on health. The availability of water and wastewater system was essential in the first and the second way, because we need of water for hygiene, as an example, the basic hand washing, but also the cleaning of hospitals and the safe water uses for other domestic purposes was essential to cope with this crisis. And fortunately, the water services were retained because of a long tradition of water safety plans implementations. So this kind of risk was not directly included in the risk matrix, because we never included pandemia in a risk matrix, but the other resiliency measures were enough effective for giving the water service the possibility to distribute safe drinking water in the difficult times of the pandemic events. And related to wastewater and sanitation, we know that there is a theoretical risk, but and the risk is real if we have lack of failure in sewer and sanitation, but the correct system are out of this kind of risk. There were anyway some indirect risk related to the water systems related to COVID. because the lockdown and other restrictions in the water service, such as the difficulties in doing the monitoring or in doing operational routine monitoring, but also maintenance of the systems were difficult during the crisis. So there are also serious risks related to stagnation of water in building, as an example in schools. And there are lots of problems that we approached into the water safety plan model. Okay, and the second part of this brief presentation wants to approach another side of the water system, which is we tried to discuss before the safety of water system versus the SARS-CoV-2, and we concluded that the water system are safe, and the current preventive and the response measures are enough effective to take under control the risk of SARS-CoV-2 to people. But we can use, as maybe you know, the wastewater as tracing of the virus in countries, and this was very interesting in one research the group of Dr. La Rosa did in Italy, because there was the first real evidence based on the detection of RNA of the virus in archived samples that she had in the freezers, in the labs, that the virus was present in Italy well before China declared the new coronavirus infection in 15th of December. With this knowledge, we are trying to develop a system that uses wastewater entering in the treatment plant to understand the extension, the presence of the virus in a qualitative way, but also the extension, the magnitude of the problem in the quantitative analysis. And we call this project SARI, which means environmental surveillance of SARS-CoV-2. And this is a very challenging idea and project, because we use environmental samples, environmental analysis done in wastewater to health part the higher level of the health part, which work in hospitals, a signal, a dimension, a trend of the virus into the population to take effective and early control measures, maybe before the lockdown. I want directly go to some quantitative data. Oh, just before, I want to say that this kind of approach was formally included in the preparedness documents by EU in July, but also in the recent report on the preparedness of the second wave in Italy. You can see it's in Italian, but I try to give the sense of this sentence, the yellow one, that we want that Italy should implement environmental surveillance of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater to have indications of the trend, of the epidemic trend, and implement early alert system. Really, this kind of system is now operating with standard procedures coordinated by our institute. And this is one of the first picture of the project. You can see here lots of structures that are center cooperating in the project. We have now 67 centers. Some of these just do sampling, other just concentration, which means ST2. Other center, more specialized, number 3, do analysis, and the 3 are the regional reference laboratories, and the 3M is National Institute of Health in charge of the coordination of this study. You can see also the number of centers per region and the sampling size. Here, a picture of that I want to share with you in some preliminary step. So these are not yet refined and passed and disseminated. And you can see in the upper portion of the slide the qualitative analysis, which can give an impression of the presence of the virus, which was detected, you can see here, in December. And in January, the first wave is clearly identified, and also the second wave is clear. This is the situation of Milan, but I want to stress the very high potential of this approach in the case of Rome. You can see here the balls, the small balls here, that are the data, raw data on the quantity of virus in the wastewater treatment plants. And you can see that in the summer, in the summer 1st of August, we had really a quite absence of the virus in Rome. But on 24th of August, we had the clear evidence of a change of the trend. So we were able to identify 15 days before the epidemiological observatory perceive the risk. We could understand that there was a serious increasing trend, and it could be very useful if we think that on 15th of September we decided to open schools and so on. I don't want to say that with this signal we can decide to open or not the school, but the perception of the trend and the possibility to understand the RT value before is very useful together with the other epidemiological and microbiological indicator. In our idea, this kind of observatory is very useful for early warning, but should always complement the epidemiological observatory based on diagnosis of the cases. But if we think to countries with limited possibility of doing the test, we can propose this system to understand the dimension and the circulation of the virus in the countries. Because as a nice person, WHO recently said, not all people go to be tested for COVID, but almost all people go to the toilet. So we could understand the circulation of the virus by detect the virus in wastewater, because this can catch also asymptomatic or post-symptomatic people. I can pass the media echo of this kind of events and the project, and I want to really thank all the people working in ISS, but also in Italy for this project and for this idea. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Luca, for this interesting presentation that is focused and addressed to the Italian situation and context, but could be interesting also for, as you said at the end, for some approaches that could be applied also in other poorer or resource-limited countries. And I ask you if you can stay until the end of the morning, or if you need to leave the meeting. Luca, can you stay until the discussion, or do you need to leave the meeting?
I try to stay because I want to, but I have some pressures. I'm not sure that I can stay. I'm very sorry for this.
If you are not sure, it's better.
Yes, it's better to have discussion for me and for you.
Yes, if we.
Now.
Okay, so I ask people if you have any question for Luca Lucentini, in case you need to raise your hand, and we can open your microphone for speaking. Otherwise, you can write the question in the chat. So in the meanwhile, people will decide for any question. I ask you, Luca, if in your opinion, the final approach you mentioned in your presentation could be applied also in resource-limited countries. Do you think that this could be an approach, a sustainable approach, and which are the benefits, and which could be the cost of this type of approach?
Thank you for your question. It's very interesting. Yes, theoretically, the approach is possible in a highly specialized lab, which we can imagine to have in a big city, also in developing countries. It is difficult to have a network of monitoring in all countries. That's very difficult because we should deliver the samples, and it's the usual problem of this kind of country. But if we think that the problem are mainly related to big cities, because in village this approach could be limited. We can also think that in big cities there is possibility to use one lab. We can use also clinical laboratories to do the analysis that is similar to the other clinical test, because it's based on a PCR. But we can also use the water supply laboratories, environmental agency, or health agencies. So I think the procedure is clear. The materials are not complex, and the costs are very limited. We can also analyze 1 or 2 samples per week. So I think it's challenging, but it's possible in a nutshell.
Thank you. Other questions? No, I don't see any other questions. So thank you, Luca, for your presentation. Bye-bye. And then
you.
Thank you.
Try
Now
to
we
stay until the end. And anyway, if you have
okay.
written questions, I try to do my best to answer. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And now I pass the floor to Ali Mansour, because in the meanwhile he could reach this meeting. Ali, are you here?
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Sabrina.
Hello.
And welcome everybody again to this. I'm based in Loughborough, UK, and I work with a number of universities, especially with Loughborough University and LSE. So really exciting to be part of this meeting, this conference, and I take over from here. Thank you very much, Sabrina.
So thank you, Ali. And now you can start with the second part of the morning that is dedicated to the presentation of case studies.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Sabrina. I mean, there were a number of very interesting points discussed during the first part, and that range of discussion points from importance of coordination by Zerbrugg, planning, and the importance of testing and early preparedness, which is quite key. And I must say we are all on a very steep learning path in this pandemic, and we know the importance of learning and evidencing throughout the last 12 months. It was very severe and exciting also, but very challenging. But I think we learning was very important. Everybody emphasized on that, whether it comes in form of data or it comes in form of reviews or evaluation. So thank you very much. We move to the further without further delay. I would like to move to the 3 very exciting case studies. We have these are short case studies, but we encourage discussion and questions after that. So we have one case study on solid waste management in Bolivia. The other one is from Ghana, which is about WASH, and third one is on emergency from Jordan. So we would like to invite speakers. So is Foranato is here?
Good morning. Yes, I'm here, Professor.
Okay, yeah. So I'm also learning the system. So we give you floor and try to restrict to within 10 minutes if possible. Thank you very much. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Can you see my presentation now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. So I start my presentation introducing myself. My name is Navarro Ferronato. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the Department of Theoretical and Applied Sciences of the University of Insubria in Varese. So my presentation is about solid waste management in low middle income countries, and my case study is in Bolivia. So the presentation is titled Sanitary Emergency Occurrences in Solid Waste Management and Related Safety Precautions in Bolivia. In these 10 minutes, I divided my presentation in 5 main parts. I will start with a brief introduction of solid waste management issues in developing countries, but Professor Zerbrugg just introduced it at all. Then I will focus on healthcare waste and municipal solid waste. So my presentation is focused on these 2 waste fractions. And then I will follow the presentation with solid waste management issues in Bolivia. Briefly, I will introduce it, and briefly I will introduce the case study of La Paz, introducing healthcare waste management issues in emergency situation. And I finally conclude with a brief introduction, always briefly, about short-term and long-term solutions and related to a project financed by the Italian Agency of Development Cooperation. So starting from the solid waste management issues in developing countries, we know that solid waste management in developing countries is quite difficult due to the lack of financial resources, technical support, among other factors. Therefore, open dumping and open burning of waste are the main solutions applied in order to reduce pollution or simply manage these type of waste fractions that we can find not only municipal solid waste, but also construction and demolition waste, waste of electronic equipment, healthcare waste, batteries, among others. And all these wastes that are dumped or burned affect the environment and the population health due to marine littering, global warming, and spread of disease, also because informal waste pickers work on these sites and might affect their health. So the main question is it emergency? So I would like to start with this question. Focusing on municipal solid waste and healthcare waste, generally speaking, municipal solid waste, we can say that is challenging its management since a huge amount are produced in developing cities and worldwide, and heterogeneous fractions are available. We can detect different fractions of solid waste that should be managed in different ways, or should be disposed of in specific conditions, such as in sanitary landfills. However, we have also opportunities such as energy or material recovery by recycling or waste-to-energy options. Instead, healthcare waste management is simpler in terms of quantities, since low quantities of waste are generated. However, we can find infectious waste, so handling precautions should be considered, as at the same time treatment solution and technologies should be introduced. So if we consider that emergency is a serious and unexpected and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action, we can say that, okay, management of healthcare waste and municipal solid waste, as Professor Zubrov introduced before, is the baseline. No? The solutions should start from the basic situations. It is a management that should be applied always. However, I would like to introduce a case study where the lack of planning affects also emergency condition when the lack of management of solid waste management occurs. So my case study is in Bolivia, a developing country in Latin America, in the center of South America. And it is a developing country classified by the World Bank as a low to middle income country. And in particular, my case study is in the city of La Paz, one of the most important cities of Bolivia. And we can say that is one of the most developed in terms of solid waste management. So we have the best case study in Bolivia. Solid waste management issues in Bolivia are similar with the one that I introduced you before. So similar with other developing countries worldwide. So waste open dumping, since about 10% of the final disposal sites are sanitary landfills, so control sites. Lack of financial resources, technical knowledge, and lack of data for planning. And this is the critical point. And this picture where you can see open dumping is the most available solution for, we can say, treating municipal solid waste or simply managing it. And waste pickers, we can find waste pickers that collect recyclable waste in these areas. However, La Paz has a sanitary landfill, so it's quite developed if compared with the 90% of the country. However, the emergency occurrences happen when lack of management and control is not implemented in such context. So in January 2019, the sanitary landfill of La Paz collapsed. So it is a case of emergency condition due to the unexpected occurrence related to solid waste management. So the sanitary landfill collapsed, affecting the population health, of course, the environmental health, due to the pollution of the river and the valley that were located around the final disposal sites. And at the same time, in the same year, in April 2019, the old open dumping area of the city that today is part of the cities is in the last 15 years, the population started the construction of settlements over there. So the old open dumps collapsed. So at the same time, we had in the same year 2 landslides that affected population health, and in second case also 7 people dying, so also affecting locally the population. In addition, March 2019, also there the COVID-19 arrives, so affecting the population. So we are speaking of about emergency. In these 2 case studies, in these 2 occurrences that affected the population, not only due to the collapse, but also due to the lack of management and the lack of planning related to emergency occurrences. So the municipal solid waste was located near the containers for about 15 to 20 days, so spreading of vectors as rats, fleas, and dogs that might support the spread of disease among the population, and the lack of other final disposal sites affect again the situation, since it was quite difficult to dispose of and manage all these waste generated among the days. And at the same time, the waste pickers and the collectors, the informal collectors, related to the informal recycling system of the city operated near these containers, so affecting and increasing the risk of pollution and increasing of health risk among the population. So all this situation increase the risk of possible spread of disease. We have not only to speak about COVID, about pandemics, but we can think about other pathogens that can spread in these areas and around these containers. The second part of the presentation is related to the healthcare waste management, as I introduced you before. Since before we have spoken about municipal solid waste, so the final disposal sites that collapsed. However, other waste fractions we can find generated in this city that has about 1 million inhabitants. So in 2018 and 2019, we implemented a research related to the evaluation of local management of healthcare waste management. And we introduced a set of indicators for evaluating local management that you can see in the picture of the slide on your left. And we found that finally evaluating different hospitals, that local treatment and awareness, security and prevention were the most difficult situation, most difficult parameters that should be introduced, since these parameters were considered problematic. We found the municipal solid waste mixed with healthcare waste. We found the difficulties in storage and also final disposal of these waste fractions. And it can be considered that finally these conditions make La Paz not resilient in emergency occurrences and difficulties in other types of management and solutions. And here in this slide, I would like to show you some news introduced in 2018 and 2019 about the spread of diseases in some hospitals of La Paz. And we are not speaking about COVID, but about other virus that spread in this situation and that are unknown virus for local hospitals or local doctors that are aware about the situation. So healthcare waste management might reduce this situation, might introduce safety precaution related to its management and its application in terms of safety to health of operators and population health. So the system, we can say finally, that is subject to continued health emergency due to the lack of planning, the lack of management. So we have to come back to the first question related to is it emergency open disposal and open burning? So it depends on when we consider it, since planning is the only solution that we have to reduce the risk of spread of pandemic or landslide of final disposal sites. So I will introduce briefly, only within this slide, a project that we started in 2019, thanks to the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation that financed a project related to the circular economy in La Paz. And we are implementing, that is coordinated by the NGO COPI, and that our universities are supporting. So our role is to support local authorities to introduce safety precaution, to introduce solutions related to solid waste management, in this case related particularly on municipal solid waste and construction and demolition waste. So another waste fraction that we can speak about, but we have not time to do it. And the project is called La Paz Recycle. So it is a support for introducing planning and actions related to sustainable and appropriate management of this waste fraction that I told you before. So the university here have a role really important in relation to technical support and to implement research related to other possibility or the others options for the exploitation for recycling of municipal solid waste and construction demolition waste, since it represents a long-term solution in order to reduce risk of landslides and spread of disease among the population. So in conclusion, with this case study, I would like to underline that, first of all, management of solid waste is related to population health. So we have to manage solid waste in order to reduce the risk to spread of pathogens and infectious disease among the population. And COVID-19 is only the last virus that occur in these areas, and the emergency in high-income countries is, of course, difficult to be managed. But of course, you have to think about that in low-middle-income country, emergency happen most of the time. So it is quite usual to find emergency occurrences. And why? Due to the lack of planning. So it is the second take-home message that I would like to introduce by my presentation. And we have to think about that waste mismanagement might affect future emergency occurrences. So the answer of the first question of my presentation is that. So open dumping and open burning today is not an emergency, but tomorrow, yes. So we have to find solutions in order to support the developing countries to manage it. And international cooperation, universities, among other actors, must support for introducing sustainable actions toward these directions. So these are also my remarks. So waste mismanagement should be avoided. Long-term solutions should be found. Professor Zurbrugg before have spoken about emergency conditions and related precautions in terms of management of risk. However, planning should be considered before its application. So the cycle of management of risk should be considered. And finally, municipal solid waste, healthcare waste, among other waste fraction, is related to support population health. So this is the last contribution of my presentation. If you are interested in the project, we can find it within our Facebook webpage. You can find it in La Paz Recycle, La Paz Recicla in Spanish. And if you are interested in our research that we are implementing in Bolivia, you can read more about it in our scientific publications and scientific articles. And I would like to thank you all, Professor Solini, Professor Vaccari for the organization and Professor Massoud for the organization of these events, since it is very interesting. And thank you very much for your attention. I'm here for your questions.
Thank you very much for Renato, and it's a very comprehensive presentation. Those who work in solid waste management can easily relate to their own projects. It's a global waste emergency, we can call it. So we hold on to the comments and questions. We have 110 plus participants joining and leaving time to time, but really we kept a very good number of participants. Please keep your comments and questions with you. You can also type it in the chat box. And we would like to now invite the next speaker. So thank you very much, Fronato, for your presentation. And we would like to go to the next presentation now. So it's on Ghana case study, and the speaker is Bartolomeo, if I pronounce it correctly. We hand over to you, Flor. Try to keep to 10 minutes so we have enough time for discussion and comments, and we are looking forward to it. So over to you, Bartolomeo, regarding Ghana case study. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mansouri. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, now let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, do you see the screen and the presentation?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, just briefly introduce yourself. Sorry, I don't have details of the speakers, but please tell where are you based and
yes,
your
yes,
bit of background.
Just wanted to make sure that everything was working properly.
It's working.
So my name is Mauro. My name is Mauro Bartolomeo. I am the country representative for CISS, which is an NGO based in Palermo, but operating in Ghana and in many other countries. Can you see the presentation now?
Yeah, we can see the presentation now.
Okay. So today case study we'll be talking about mitigation and support to vulnerable communities in northern Ghana. The intervention that we're going to talk about today was carried out under the Sustainable Livelihoods Project, which is a project funded by the European Union and implemented by 4 organizations, meaning our organization, then there are 2 Ghanaian NGOs and CeTAmb Lab. So the main purpose of the Sustainable Livelihood Project is to reduce the socioeconomic and climate change related vulnerabilities of the rural population living in Ghana Savannah by enhancing their capacities to access research, best practices and innovation. So just to give a bit of an overview on the project is conceived as an integrated approach to reduce the vulnerability with 4 clusters of activity. 1 cluster is dedicated to agriculture with a focus on cashew value chain and beekeeping integration. And then we have a second cluster which is related to appropriate technologies. A third cluster which is related to increase the access to social protection schemes. And a 4th cluster which is more related to the dissemination of the results. So just to give a bit of context, we're going to talk about Ghana, which is a country situated in Western Africa. With a 30 million population, Ghana is considered one of the most developed countries in the region. Just to go back in time and to see how Ghana reacted to the pandemic, what happened in Ghana that the response was quite quick. As a matter of fact, after the 2 first cases were encountered in the country, just a few days after, ban on public gatherings was imposed. As well as the border closures that happened just 10 days after. And then a lockdown was imposed on the 2 main cities of Ghana, namely Accra and Kumasi. From the 15th of June also, the compulsory use of nose mask on the outdoor was introduced. And finally, on the 1st of September, there was a partial reopening of the country. So far, the Ghana has performed quite well if we rely on official statistics. If we consider that it's a 30 million country, we can see how the number of deaths was quite low and the cases per 1 million people was, as a matter of fact, also quite low. This is a map that shows a bit of what is the distribution of the contagiousness within the country. As we can see, the south side, which is where the capital is the part more affected, probably because of the density of population and probably also because of the ability to test and trace the people, while the northern part of the country, which is the part where our project takes place, has had a very low impact according to official numbers. So The intervention, the WASH campaign that we're going to talk about, was carried out in the context of rural Ghana. Rural Ghana is, of course, the most fragile part of the country. It's situated on the border with Burkina Faso. And as you can see from the pictures, the communities, the villages, they present quite big challenges in terms of water, sanitation, and hygiene condition. As we can see from the pictures, these are some of the villages where we intervene. At the beginning of the intervention, a pre-assessment was made. We went around in all the communities to actually see what is the magnitude of the challenges that were there. The type of construction of houses that you can find in this kind of villages, there are two types. There are the ones that are more made of concrete, and then there are the more traditional building made of mud and dung. So when it comes to water and sanitation, we can see that open defecation is quite common in the rural communities, even though many attempts were done in order to try to improve the adoption of better standard. In the pictures, we can see two types of latrine that we encountered during our assessment field visit. But for instance, regarding waste management, there is a complete lack of basic services when it comes to waste management, meaning that there is nobody that is taking care of the waste management situation. And this is the result. The result is that we have an open dump site just in the middle of the communities. And the additional problem is also that the cattle and the poultry, they used to go and feed themselves, and then of course they get inside the food chain that of course also increase the health risk for the people living in the communities. In here we can see another example of for instance wastewater pipe that goes directly into the ground, increasing considerably the risk of pollution for the groundwater, especially when we have crops growing inside the communities itself and putting everything in a more hazardous situation. Wastewater all are quite common, and the thing is that as you can see from the picture, the source of water usually comes, of course, from the groundwater, increasing the risk for the people living in the communities. This is more related to another environmental side of the situation, which is the cooking stations, which are used mainly 3 stones fire. I mean, we can clearly see that the risk of exposure to CO2 is very high, especially for women that spend most of their daily life in cooking. So the intervention was carried out in the north side of the country, Upper West and Upper East region, although the project focuses on 6 regions in total. The intervention initially was conceived as a first step for the introduction of appropriate technologies, namely anaerobic digester, improved cooking stoves, and composting bin. But of course, it became quite clear that with the COVID-19 pandemic, the WASH instrument could have been used also to integrate the prevention measures that were given by the government. This is a call for proposal that is related to the environmental technologies that we just dropped, but moving forward. The theoretical framework that we adopted in the delivery of the campaign was the community-led total sanitation. So, of course, in the last few years, it became more and more clear that very often the adoption of correct behaviors is not really related to health benefits, meaning that even though the population becomes aware of the link between low standard in hygiene, water and sanitation, and improved health, they still struggle in adopting this kind of correct behavior. So it became clear more and more that the link is more to the benefit that could be gained through improved social status, convenience, safety, comfort, and smell of the adoption of better standard with regards to water and sanitation and hygiene. In this way, the intervention was carried out in order to mobilize the community, making the community aware of the situation in terms of benefit that could come from the health improvement, and triggering the community desire for collective change in order to kind of stimulate a mutual support among the members of the communities, resulting in a greater ownership and sustainability of the intervention. As I was saying before, what we did is just integrating the COVID-19 awareness activities inside the WASH campaign that we carried out. We established 3 levels of, let's say, implementation. The first level was training the health officers in order to create also a solid base for a long-term sustainability of this kind of intervention. The second level is the community mobilization with direct intervention inside the community. And the third level was the radio intervention in order to reach a broader audience. So we started with the training of the community health officers that follow us during our intervention. We developed the behavioral change and communication materials that were designed in the simplest way possible, even because there is a high rate of illiteracy in the communities, and the challenge comes when you have many communities very close but speaking different dialects. So this is why we try to make our material as much visual as possible. We involved the youth because, of course, we consider them to be the engine of change. So they were involved from stage 1 in the campaigns inside the communities. The campaigners were actually very active in delivering the activities, because they were the one going around and kind of presenting both the project and both the necessity to decrease certain kind of actions, certain kind of behaviors that could not lead to any good. Mobilization of community was very, very important. So trying to for the people to come together in order to have a common knowledge on what was the intervention about and what was the purpose of our intervention. Of course, mass distribution followed, and as you can imagine, the situation in the rural communities and the level of awareness on the disease was and is nowadays quite low. The communities are very isolated, but we tried as much as possible to suggest which were the correct equipment to wear in order to prevent the spread of the disease. This is an example of a mask from Ghana. I know it's very cool. So the important thing is that the WASH campaign, as a matter of fact, provided us with a tool that could actually be integrated in all the rest of our activities. This is why we adopted prevention measures, both for training with, of course, nose mask, social distancing, and also for the workshop, and for all the activities that have been carried out under the Sustainable Livelihoods project. The third level was, of course, the one of the radio interventions that allowed us to reach a broader audience. This is why the communities situated in the north side of Ghana, they're very isolated and very far from one another, and the only means of communication that actually reach everywhere is the radio. But as a part of the prevention activity in terms of COVID-19, what definitely has proved to be very effective are the prevention kits. This is how we call them, the COVID-19 prevention kit that we distributed with protective equipment, especially soap, especially things to clean your hands. But I think that the tool that really allowed us and allowed especially the country in the fight, in improving the fight against COVID-19 are the buckets that you see in the background, which are called Veronica bucket, which is a very simple device that was invented by a Ghanaian researcher called Veronica Beoke, that invented the bin, the bucket, as a tool to reduce cholera, diarrhea, among other diseases. And although it can seem a very simple device, it actually to be proven to be very effective, especially in context where the lack of running water is just the standard. So this kind of bucket was already used during, for instance, the Ebola outbreak, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, it became very common all over Ghana, going from the cities to the rural communities. You can find this bucket everywhere, placed in the communities in strategical location, for instance, in front of the house of the chief, or where the markets are located. And this really allowed to improve the capacity of the local population to prevent the disease. So these are some of the beneficiaries of our WASH campaign. And as you can see, of course, it's not always easy to maintain social distancing, especially in the rural context, but we did our best. Thank you for your attention. This is all.
Thank you very much, Bartolano, for very comprehensive presentation, but also you showed a number of very interesting photographs and slides and captured the attention of all of us very well. So please keep writing your questions and comments. We will take those in the end. I would like now to invite the last case study, which is based in Jordan, and this is from Masood. So Masood, please take the floor.
Good afternoon, and thank you for that. I'm starting with sharing my screen. Please tell me if you can see it.
Not now. Can you go to the slides?
Yeah, I'm trying. Can you see it now?
Almost. Click on the slides. I think where are the slides? So we can see your screen, but you're not on the slides.
Okay. I'm just trying to do that.
Can you click on those slides which you prepared? They are at the bottom, I think.
Can you see it now?
Can you click on the PowerPoint? We don't see.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
see.
doing
that.
Yeah, I'm sharing the screen. Can you see it now? Okay, I would stop sharing and sharing it again.
Okay. I think it's doing something better. Yeah, I think it's better now. But we still don't see the slides. We see your name only.
No.
Giovanni, can you help Masood?
Yeah, I'm just one second.
You go to here. You should just try again, and maybe from here. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, now I think you can see
I
it.
think it's better now. Yeah, we can see now. Thank you
so
very much.
sorry
You
for
can
that.
make us start. Yeah.
I will be fast. Okay, I will start introducing myself. My name is Ahmad Masoud. I'm from Jordan, and I'm doing my PhD in University of Brescia in the Civil and Environmental Engineering. Today, with the pleasure, I'm gonna present you some case studies from Jordan about WASH and emergencies. Okay, I will just skip this to go directly to describe some facts and figures about Jordan. Jordan is a small country in Middle East, locating in the Asian continent. More than 10.5 million living over an area of approximately 89,000 square kilometers. It's well known that Jordan ranked among the poorest countries with water resources available per capita. 60% of Jordanian people living in urban areas and pre-urban areas where they're having sanitation facilities and services, starting from wastewater network to wastewater treatment plants. And they have their water by a piped water network, while the remaining 40% mainly living in rural areas where they have a water supply services, but they are facing lack of sanitation services. With the starting of the well-known Syrian conflict or Syrian war in 2011, Jordan received more than 1.4 million of Syrian refugees. For that, Jordan was named in 2016 as the largest refugee hosting country per capita in the world. These refugees mainly living in one of the biggest camps in the region. His name is Azatri camp, which is host more than 76,000 refugees, where 20% of them are children less than 5 years. Of course, when they came to Jordan, they came to an empty land, and they were suffering from lack of sanitation services, sufficient water, and even they were facing severe weather conditions. To respond to that, a lot of NGOs came and like Oxfam Great Britain, it came to provide like the basic needs. We're talking about WASH basic needs here to the refugees. So luckily, I was part of Oxfam teams to respond to that crisis, starting from the emergency stage at 2013, 2012 as well. And at that time, we implemented a public wash facilities, like public toilets and public laundry areas. And all of that according to the humanitarian standards, mainly talking about sphere standards, considering the protection measures, gender measures, and disability things. For the water supplies, also under emergency, we relied on water trucks, like to bring water from outside the camp and to deliver it to a public water tanks, which is distributed within the camps according to the humanitarian standards. And to check the quality and to be assured that it's out of contaminations, we will regularly do a quality test for the water on a different levels, on water trucks, households, and even at the public water tanks. And here we can see some pictures about the public toilets that we implemented there, and of course we implemented them with workers from the refugees themselves to provide them cash on hand for their life and also to enhance the sense of ownership for these wash facilities. Same thing we did with the water trucks and with the supplying waters, and of course we considered daily disinfections for these public facilities to avoid any potential of contaminations. After the emergency stage, we started with the development stage in the camp, talking about water sectors. UNICEF, or with the help of UNICEF, 3 boreholes were established inside the camps, 2 of them inside the camps and 1 outside the camp, to deliver almost 3,000 cubic meters of fresh water every day. And the public water tanks, they were replaced with a pipe network to deliver an average of 40 to 50 liters per capita per day to each household. At the sanitation levels, all the public toilets were demolished and replaced with a private toilet per household. A wastewater treatment plants were established specifically to treat wastewater from a ZATRI camp, and all these private toilets, let's say, or at the level of household, the wastewater were collected by a new established wastewater network to deliver or to convey the wastewater from the household to the treatment plants. This wastewater network consisted of pipelines, a septic tanks, which is designed to separate the liquid side from the solid particles, and only the free solid water flows to the treatment plants for further treatments and to be reused in the agriculture according to the Jordanian standards. While the NGOs and UNICEF trying to maintain these services to people, of course, the pandemic of COVID-19 started, as a response for that, and since the camp is a closed area where entering the camp and getting out of the camp, you need a certain permits for that, UNICEF started to make a disinfection process at the gates of the camps. So to be sure that everything is entering the camp is disinfected properly. We are talking mainly about cars, peoples, and any stuff. While they also constructed a new area to quarantine or to isolate the positive COVID cases. This new area has a full wash facilities, public toilets, private toilets, waters, all the wash facilities that is needed by the positive cases there, with a total capacity of 280 persons. While the suspected people, they can quarantine themselves in their household because they already have their own wash facilities, their own toilets, and their own water tank. As well as they constructed a new hospital specifically for COVID-19. This hospital is facilitated with all devices that is needed by positive COVID cases. To enhance the hygienic practices and the cleanings, the daily rate of water supply has been increased from 50 to an average of 65 liters per capita per day. Not just that, but also a multi-distribution of cleaning kits and hygiene kits, which include sanitizers, hand sanitizers, soap bars, till now are taking place according to the family size and to family members. Each distribution also is coming with an awareness raising sessions about how to use these kits and the importance of that, and to check the most critical contaminated places and focusing on the importance of these kits to face this COVID-19. For this raising awareness, different mechanism has been taking, like digital one, of course, by online sessions, social media, and in some cases, face-to-face sessions, considering the social media and wearing masks. Here we can see some pictures of these activities that implemented by the UNICEF, and the printed flyers that also were distributed in each with each hygiene kits. That shows how to use them and the importance of using the hygiene kits. The second case study that I will present is about another camp in Jordan. His name is Al-Azraq. The situation is a bit different because these camps, they still have a public toilets and a public water tanks. The capacity of this camp is around 35,000, which is half of a ZATRI camp. It's divided into 4 villages. Each village is divided into 4 blocks, and then at the least level is street level, where it contains 12 households. For each street, there is 4 public toilets, while for the water supply, there is a tap stands, public tap stands at the village levels. So that's why it was hard for UNICEF and the NGOs to deal with COVID in this camp. They tried to follow what they did in a ZATRI camp, like disinfection at the gates and quarantine positive cases in a specific area, but due to limited capacities of these areas and the high numbers of positive cases, they started to quarantine them in their household. But in this case, because they are having public toilets, so they started to quarantine the whole street. So the whole street will be isolated, and every isolated street is provided with a public water tanks to deliver the water supply. So instead of going to the tap stands, no, they have their own water at the street levels. And the hygiene kits and the sanitizers, they have it on a monthly basis in parallel to the raising awareness sessions on a different mechanism, as they did in a Zaatari camp. The final case study that I want to show now is a small town in Jordan. Its name is Al-Azraq. It exists in the eastern part of Jordan. It hosts more than 15,000 people, and it hosts the Azraq camp that I just mentioned before. Why it's urgent, or why we consider it as an emergency case? Because this town is located on over a very important aquifer in Jordan that supplies 3 countries with the fresh water. And this town, they don't have a proper sanitation system at all. They are using mainly septic tanks, unsealed septic tanks, and they discharge their loads in an illegal dump site, causing a lot of contaminations to the groundwater and to the soil. As a response to that, an initiative came from the Swiss Development Agency to implement a project to provide a full sanitation system to this town. This project is implemented by two NGOs, Borda and Zika, and they started in 2018 with doing assessment and a visibility study for the situations parallel to a laboratory tests to check the characteristics of this water, of the wastewater, and aiming to provide them with a sanitation value chain, starting from containment, emptying, to reuse or disposal after the treatment. But due to lack of budget, they focused on providing them a treatment plant instead of using the illegal dump site. And while they were selecting or comparing with different technologies, 2-stage constructed wetland have been chosen based on a lot of advantage points. And now they are doing a design for this 2-stage constructed wetland and also implementing an environmental impact analysis for the projects to the town. While they are doing that, actually, COVID-19 is started. So the Swiss Development Agency considers an effort to help people to face this lockdown in collaborations with the implemented agencies. So what they did is they started with make information dissemination about COVID using printed flyers, social media, and even direct phone call. These printed flyers were distributed also with a hygiene kits or a COVID kits, as they name it, which consist of sanitizers, soap bars, masks, and gloves. They already distributed these hygiene kits using labels from the town itself, just to provide them more like cash on hand by using cash for work programs. They considered also doing a rehabilitations and renovations for some wash facilities in public schools. So as expected, if the students go back to school in the second semesters, they will find fully rehabilitated wash facilities to help them facing this COVID-19 and other health issues. And it's not coming by alone, no, it's coming also with raising awareness of flyers and printed flyers inside these wash facilities. And with this, I'm ending my presentations, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Masood, for a very clear and comprehensive presentation with a lot of very useful data. So we now open the floor for questions and comments. And before we conclude some of the learning points from these 3 presentations, 3 case studies, and they are from very different contexts. So I'm sure it's a really great learning opportunity for all of us. So if you have any questions, you can write down in the chat box, or you can raise your hand, and I think somebody will hand over to you the microphone. So if there are no questions or comments, I mean, I would like to conclude this by saying that I really enjoyed, and I think we all enjoyed the 3 case studies and the morning papers. Those who attended, they talked about a range of issues, and for me, the learning point is really about this transition from the emergency situation to sustainable development situation, which was a common theme in all 3 presentations. When we have an emergency, although emergency is tough for everybody, but it gives us an opportunity to do something positive and to develop new things, new infrastructure into the community, and also to think about sustaining. And also it introduces some innovation. So I think that link between the emergency and sustainable development came out very clearly in all the presentations, whether it's an accident or a project in Ghana or a situation in the camp. I also liked, number of things in the presentation, especially the innovation, and especially taking innovation to the rural areas, which we often forget. In terms of solid waste management or wash or any other, we don't think sometimes that rural areas worth of innovation, but that is a wrong assumption in my opinion. And I think that was very well covered in the second presentation by Bortolono, and also the tough situation in the camps. Masood covered quite a number of areas, including the data and the learning points and how the situation changed and can be very different from the normal situation, normal emergency situation we are all used to. So there are range of very interesting points and very clearly presented presentations with some really good data. I mean, I would like to suggest to all the speakers that please be reflective on your papers. Please be critical on your papers and challenge sometime yourself, challenge the context, and bring out the issues. The current research I'm doing, really in 3-4 research projects I'm involved, we have to probe more and more on understanding the challenges and learning point. So I think with that note, I finish my part, and I don't know whether any concluding points from Mentor or Giovanni or Professor Sabrina. So thank you very much for invitation, and thank you to the organizers for the conference.
Okay, thank you, Masood. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can
as
hear.
you know, this afternoon after lunch, we have the second session of the conference, that it will be in Italian, and I'm just sharing in the chat box the link to watch the second part of the conference on YouTube for those who are interested. That it will start at 2:30. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Let's meet later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.